The silence in the dining room was so heavy it felt like it was crushing the oxygen right out of my lungs. Outside, the autumn wind howled across the darkened hills of Connecticut, but inside, the atmosphere was even colder. I sat at the edge of my seat, my fingers trembling as I gripped a cheap plastic fork, a stark contrast to the sterling silver set before everyone else. Across the table, my grandmother, Evelyn Vance, sat like a queen on a throne. She had been away in London for 3 years, managing the family's international estates. Her sudden return for Thanksgiving was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare. "I visited the lake house this morning, Marcus," Evelyn said, her voice dropping like a lead weight into the silence. She didn't look at my father, she looked through him. "The $3 million property I bought for Clara 3 years ago." Imagine my surprise when a couple I've never met answered the door and told me they were the in-laws of your daughter, Sarah. My heart stopped. The piece of turkey I was chewing turned into ash in my mouth. A lake house, $3 million bought for me. I looked at my father, Marcus. His face, usually a mask of arrogance, was now a sickly shade of gray. Beside him, my stepmother, Diane, was clutching her wine glass so hard I thought it would shatter. And then there was Sarah, my stepsister. She was staring at her plate, her breathing shallow and jagged. "Grandmother," I whispered, my voice cracking. "What lake house? I live in a studio apartment in the industrial district. It has mold on the walls and the heater broke 2 months ago. I've been working 60 hours a week at the logistics warehouse just to pay off the student loans Dad told me were my responsibility to handle alone." Evelyn's sharp, piercing eyes snapped to mine. For a split second, I saw a flicker of agonizing pain in them, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, predatory fury directed at the rest of the table. "You live in a slum, Clara. While your father sent me monthly photos of you relaxing on the deck of the lake house, while he sent me thank you notes supposedly written by your hand, Clara is..." "She's confused, Mother," my father stammered, his voice rising in a panicked pitch. "She's been having these episodes, mental instability. We didn't want to worry you while you were overseas. We moved her to the city for specialized treatment. Sarah and her husband are just house-sitting to keep the property maintained. It's for the family's benefit. Episodes." I stood up, the chair screeching violently against the hardwood floor. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage blurred my vision. "You told me you were broke. When I begged you for help with my medical bills last year after the accident, you told me I was a leech and that I needed to learn the value of $1. All while you were sitting on a multi-million-dollar estate that belonged to me." "Shut up, Clara," Sarah hissed, finally looking up. Her face was twisted with a cruel, entitled sneer. "Look at you, you're a nobody, you're a warehouse grunt. You would have wasted that house. Marcus and I are actually using it to network. My husband's parents are influential people. We're building a legacy. You're just a mistake that should have stayed in the shadows." The room went ice cold. This was my family. The people who had watched me struggle, watched me lose weight because I couldn't afford groceries, all while they lived in luxury funded by my inheritance. Evelyn stood up slowly, her silk gown rustling like a warning. She didn't scream, she didn't have to. "A mistake, Sarah. The only mistake here was me trusting a son who has the soul of a grave robber." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. She tapped the screen and placed it on the table. "I didn't come here today to eat turkey, Marcus. I came here to perform an autopsy on this family." "Mom, please," Diane pleaded, her voice trembling. "We can settle this. We'll move Sarah out tomorrow. We'll give Clara a monthly allowance. There's no need to involve outsiders." "It's a bit late for that, Diane," Evelyn said coldly. At that exact moment, the front door chimes echoed through the house. It wasn't the sound of a guest. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of authority. Through the frosted glass of the foyer, I saw the silhouettes of 3 men in dark suits. "Meet Mr. Elias Thorne," Evelyn announced as the men were ushered in by the maid. "He is the head of my forensic legal team, and behind him are 2 investigators from the district attorney's office." Elias Thorne stepped into the dining room. He was a man who looked like he had never smiled in his life. He placed a heavy, leather-bound folder on the table and opened it. "Good evening," Thorne said, his voice as dry as parchment. "We have spent the last 72 hours tracking the flow of funds from the Vance Trust. It appears that over $4 million has been embezzled through a series of shell companies managed by Marcus Vance. We also have evidence of identity theft, document forgery, and a very interesting trail of anonymous emails sent to major corporations to ensure that Clara Vance remained unemployed and destitute." I felt the world tilt. It wasn't just the house. They had systematically sabotaged my career. They had made sure I couldn't get a job, keeping me in a state of desperate poverty so I would never have the resources to find out the truth. "You ruined my life," I whispered, looking at my father. "You didn't just steal money, you tried to erase me." My father didn't answer. He slumped into his chair, the image of a broken man, but Sarah wasn't done. She lunged toward the folder on the table, her face a mask of desperation. "Those documents are fake, you can't prove anything. My husband is a lawyer, he'll sue you all for slander." "Your husband," Elias Thorne said, looking at Sarah with pity, "is currently being detained at his office for questioning regarding the laundering of the lake house rental income. He's already talking, Sarah. Men like him don't do well in handcuffs, he's blaming everything on you." Sarah's scream of rage echoed through the house, but it was drowned out by the sound of the investigators stepping forward. "Marcus Vance, Diane Vance, and Sarah Miller," the lead investigator said, pulling out 3 sets of gleaming steel handcuffs. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, conspiracy, and fraud." As the metal clicked shut around my father's wrists, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel pity. I felt the first breath of fresh air I'd had in 3 years. Evelyn walked over to me and placed a firm, warm hand on my shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Clara. Tonight we burn the weeds. Tomorrow we start building your empire." I looked at the turkey, the fine wine, and the terrified faces of the people who had tried to destroy me. Then I picked up the wine glass Sarah had been using, walked to the sink, and poured the expensive red liquid down the drain. "I think I'm done with this dinner," I said, my voice finally strong, "and I'm done with all of you." As the investigators led Marcus, Diane, and Sarah toward the door, the house felt like it was purging a poison. Sarah was hysterical, her screams about unfairness echoing down the hallway until the heavy front door thudded shut, cutting her off. Silence returned to the dining room, but it was no longer the suffocating silence of a trap. It was the quiet of a graveyard for the lives they had built on my back. Evelyn didn't sit back down. She stood tall, watching the foyer with an unreadable expression. Then she turned to Elias Thorne. "Elias, I want the locks on this house changed within the hour. I want every bank account associated with Marcus and Diane frozen by midnight. If they so much as buy a pack of gum with my family's money, I want to know about it." "Already in motion, Mrs. Vance," Thorne replied, tucking a pen into his suit pocket. "The court order for the freeze was signed 2 hours ago. We're also preparing the eviction notices for the in-laws currently occupying the lake house. They'll have 48 hours to vacate before the sheriff removes them forcibly." I sank into a chair, my legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. 3 years, I whispered, staring at the empty space where my father had stood. "They let me walk through fire for 3 years while they sat in the shade." Evelyn walked over to me, her sharp features softening. She pulled out a small, velvet pouch from her pocket and placed it on the table in front of me. "I sent this to you for your 21st birthday, Clara. I was told you sold it to buy party supplies and that you didn't want anything to do with family heirlooms." I opened the pouch. Inside was a vintage emerald pendant glowing with a deep sea green light. "It was my mother's, my real mother, who had passed away when I was 10, I gasped, clutching the cold stone to my chest. "I never saw this, I thought Dad had lost it in the move." "He didn't lose it," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with a rare touch of emotion. "He kept it for Sarah. Diane has been wearing your mother's pearls to every gala in the city, telling everyone they were gifts from a loving husband. They didn't just want the money, Clara. They wanted to erase the memory of who you are." Rage, fresh and hot, flared up in my gut. "How deep does this go, Elias? You mentioned they sabotaged my jobs?" Thorne pulled a tablet from his briefcase and slid it toward me. "Look at the sent folder from your father's private server. Every time you reached the final round of an interview at a prestigious firm, Vanguard, Deloitte, Sterling Cooper, an email followed from a concerned third party. It contained forged medical records claiming you had a history of violent outbursts and workplace theft. They even created fake social media profiles in your name, posting derogatory comments about the companies you were applying to." I scrolled through the emails, my hands shaking. It was all there. My father, the man I had looked up to, had systematically dismantled my reputation. He had ensured that no one in the professional world would touch me. He wanted me stuck in that warehouse. He wanted me too tired and too broken to ever ask questions. "And the student loans?" I asked. "That was Sarah's idea," Thorne said, pointing to a series of text messages between her and Diane. "The trust I set up for your education was more than enough to cover your Ivy League tuition, but your father redirected those funds into a consulting account for Sarah's failed fashion line. To cover the tracks, they took out high-interest private loans in your name using your forged signature. They made you pay for your own education while they spent your inheritance on Sarah's vanity projects." I looked at the emerald in my hand. For 3 years, I had blamed myself. I thought I was a failure, I thought I was unlucky, I thought I was just not enough for the Vance name, but the truth was far more sinister. I wasn't a failure, I was a victim of a coordinated heist. "What happens now?" I asked, looking at Evelyn. "Now," Evelyn said, her eyes flashing with a predatory light, "we take it all back, not just the house, not just the money, we take back your name." Elias has already contacted the firms that rejected you. He's providing them with the forensic evidence of the sabotage. But more importantly, Clara, you are now the sole decision-maker for the Vance estate. Your father has been stripped of his title, Diane is no longer a beneficiary, and Sarah? Evelyn paused, a cold smile playing on her lips. Sarah is about to find out what it's like to live in a studio apartment with no heater. No, I said, standing up. That's too good for her. I want her to see what she tried to take. I turned to Elias. I want a full audit of every cent they spent, every vacation, every designer bag, every meal. I want a civil suit filed alongside the criminal charges. I want them to owe me for the rest of their lives. I want their wages garnished in prison. I want them to feel the weight of every dollar they stole. Elias nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. Consider it done, Ms. Vance. Evelyn walked to the head of the table and picked up a crystal glass. A toast, she said, her voice echoing in the grand room. To the true heir, to Clara, may your enemies rot in the darkness they built for you. I didn't drink. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark driveway where the police lights were fading into the distance. My life as a warehouse grunt was over. But the Clara who had survived that life, the Clara who knew how to fight when she had nothing, was the one who was going to lead this family now. Elias, I said without turning around, prepare the car, we're going to the lake house. I want to be there when the sun rises over my property. It's a long drive, Ms. Vance, Elias noted. I've been waiting 3 years, I replied. I can wait a few more hours to watch Sarah's world crumble in person. The drive to the lake house was a blur of dark silhouettes and the hum of the engine, but inside the car the air felt electric. I sat in the backseat of Evelyn's black sedan, the emerald pendant clutched tightly in my hand. Beside me, Evelyn remained silent, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. She wasn't just my grandmother tonight, she was the architect of a long-overdue justice. As we pulled into the long, winding driveway of Emerald Cliff Manor, the headlights swept over a magnificent structure of glass, stone, and cedar. It sat perched on the edge of the cliff, overlooking the moonlit expanse of the lake. It was breathtaking, and it was mine. But the beauty was marred by the sight of 2 expensive SUVs parked out front, vehicles that had undoubtedly been paid for with my stolen inheritance. They're still here, I said, my voice cold. Not for long, Elias Thorne replied from the front seat. He checked his watch. The sheriff's deputies should be arriving in 5 minutes. We've already deactivated their gate codes and garage openers remotely. We stepped out of the car just as the first glimmer of dawn began to bleed over the horizon. The front door of the manor swung open, and a man in a silk robe stepped out, rubbing his eyes. It was Kevin, Sarah's husband. When he saw the small fleet of cars and the stern-faced men in suits, his sleepy confusion instantly turned into panic. What is this? Kevin shouted, his voice cracking. This is private property, you're trespassing. Elias Thorne stepped forward, holding a thick stack of legal documents. Actually, Mr. Miller, you are the one trespassing. This property is owned by Clara Vance. Your lease, which we've determined was a fraudulent document created by your wife, has been nullified by the state. You have 60 minutes to pack your essentials and vacate. You can't do this. Kevin yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. Do you know who my father is? He was on the board, Evelyn interrupted, stepping into the light. I had a very interesting conversation with the chairman of his firm an hour ago. It seems they don't take kindly to their members being involved in multi-million-dollar money laundering schemes. Your father isn't coming to save you, Kevin. He's too busy trying to hire a criminal defense lawyer for himself. Kevin's mouth fell open. The bravado drained out of him, leaving behind a terrified boy in an expensive robe. Behind him, his parents appeared in the doorway, looking disheveled and frantic. Kevin, what's going on? His mother wailed. They're saying we have to leave. Everything we own is in this house. Then you'd better start packing fast, I said, stepping past Kevin and entering the foyer. The interior was even more luxurious than I imagined. Vaulted ceilings, heated marble floors, and art that cost more than my entire life's earnings. I walked into the kitchen and saw a half-empty bottle of vintage champagne on the counter. They had been celebrating while I was counting pennies for bus fare. Clara, wait. Kevin's mother grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with desperation. We didn't know. Sarah told us the house was hers. She said you were? Unwell, we thought we were helping by keeping the place lived in. I pulled my arm away, looking at her with total indifference. You lived here for 3 years for $5,000 a month, a fraction of what this place is worth. You knew the price was too good to be true. You chose not to ask questions because the luxury was too comfortable. In my book, that makes you an accomplice. I walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window that faced the lake. The sun was finally cresting the hills, turning the water into a sheet of liquid gold. It was the view I was supposed to have seen every morning for the last 3 years. Elias, I called out over my shoulder, Check the garage. If those SUVs were bought using funds from the Vance Trust, impound them, they can walk to the main road. No, Kevin screamed, charging toward me. Those are ours, you can't take our cars. Two deputies who had just arrived stepped in his path and pinned his arms behind his back. Easy there, son, one of them said. Unless you want to join your wife at the precinct, I suggest you start grabbing your suitcases. The next hour was a spectacle of pure, unadulterated chaos. I watched as the high society Miller family scrambled to stuff their designer clothes into trash bags because they couldn't find their luggage fast enough. I watched Sarah's mother cry over a crystal vase she wasn't allowed to take. I watched the people who had looked down on me as a warehouse grunt be reduced to shivering wrecks on the side of the road. As the last of them trudged down the driveway carrying nothing but a few bags, Sarah's husband turned back to look at me one last time. You're a monster, Clara, you've destroyed a family. No, Kevin, I replied, standing on the deck of my home. I just stopped a group of thieves from pretending they were a family. There's a difference. Once they were gone, the silence that settled over the manor was different. It was clean. Evelyn walked up beside me, handing me a cup of coffee she had found in the kitchen. The forensic team will be here at noon to do a full sweep. We need to find every hidden asset, every offshore account your father might have tucked away. I want it all, Grandma, I said, staring at the lake. I want the money, the interest, and the damages. But more than that, I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else. I want their names dragged through the mud until the word Vance only belongs to us. Evelyn nodded, a grim smile on her face. That's my girl. But remember, Clara, the best revenge isn't just taking back what was stolen. It's becoming the person they tried to make sure you never became. I took a sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through me. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about debt or hunger or the cold. I was thinking about the future. Elias, I said, turning to the attorney, cancel my shifts at the warehouse and call the dean of the business school at the university. Tell him Clara Vance is ready to finish her degree, and tell him I'll be paying in cash. The sun was fully up now, lighting up the manor in a brilliant, defiant glow. The cage was broken, the hunters had become the prey. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal firestorms and social upheaval. While the walls of Emerald Cliff Manor provided a sanctuary of peace, the world outside was erupting. News of the Vance family heist hit the headlines of every major financial paper in the Northeast. My father's prestigious reputation, which he had guarded more fiercely than his own daughter's life, was incinerated overnight. I sat in the study of the manor, a room paneled in rich mahogany that smelled of old books and victory. Elias Thorne sat across from me, laying out a series of folders that looked like the blueprints for a total demolition. The criminal cases are moving faster than expected, Elias said, his voice carrying a hint of professional satisfaction. Your father, Marcus, is facing 20 years for grand larceny and embezzlement. Diane is being charged as a co-conspirator, but the real news is Sarah. She tried to flee to a friend's estate in Vermont, but the police intercepted her at a gas station. She's currently being held without bail because she's considered a flight risk. I leaned back in the plush leather chair, feeling a strange lack of emotion. I thought I would feel more, maybe a twinge of guilt or a spark of joy, but all I felt was a profound sense of justice. And the money, Elias, how much did they actually take? Elias sighed, opening a ledger. Between the redirected trust funds, the high-interest loans they took out in your name, and the rental income from this house, the total exceeds $6 million. We've managed to claw back about $4 million by liquidating their personal assets. Their city penthouse is on the market, their vehicles have been auctioned, and Diane's jewelry collection, including your mother's pearls, is back in our possession. He slid a small box across the desk. I opened it to find the shimmering pearls. They felt heavy and cool in my hand. They wore my mother's legacy while they watched me starve, I whispered. I want the remaining $2 million, Elias. I don't care if they have to work in the prison laundry for 10 cents an hour for the rest of their lives. I want every cent accounted for. We're going after the Millers next, Thorne added. Kevin's father is being sued for his role in the laundering. He's already offered a settlement of $1.5 million just to keep his name out of the criminal proceedings. Do you want to take it? No, I said firmly. Take them to trial. I want the public to see exactly how these pillars of society operate. If we settle, they get to keep their secrets. I want them exposed. A knock at the door interrupted us. My grandmother Evelyn walked in looking more radiant than I had ever seen her. Retirement in London had softened her, but this battle had reignited her spirit. Clara, she said, handing me a thick envelope. A letter arrived from the university. And another from Vanguard, the firm that gave you the final rejection 2 years ago. I opened the letter from Vanguard first. It was a formal apology from the CEO himself. They had conducted an internal investigation into the anonymous emails and found that their HR director had been a college friend of my father. The director had been fired, and Vanguard was now offering me a senior analyst position with a signing bonus that made my head spin. I looked at the letter, then at the beautiful lake shimmering outside my window. 2 years ago, I would have cried with joy at this offer. Now I felt something different. "I'm going to decline," I said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Decline, Clara, this is the career you fought for." "No, Grandma, this is the career they tried to steal." But while I was working at that warehouse, while I was calculating logistics for $10 an hour just to survive, I realized I'm better than an analyst position. I don't want to work for a firm that was so easily manipulated by a lie. I looked at Elia's. I want to start my own firm, Vance Restitution and Consulting. I want to help people who have been victims of financial abuse and family fraud. I want to use my story and my resources to make sure people like Marcus and Sarah have nowhere left to hide. Evelyn's eyes glowed with pride. "You've grown claws, Clara, I love it." But the day wasn't just about business. Later that afternoon, I received a call from the prison. It was a collect call from Sarah. Against my better judgment, I accepted. "Clara, Clara, is that you?" Her voice was unrecognizable, thin, ragged, and stripped of its usual venom. "Please, you have to help me, it's horrible here. The women, they're mean and it's cold and the food is. Please just tell the judge it was all a mistake. Tell them we were just joking." "Joking, Sarah?" I asked, my voice as flat as a desert floor. "Was it a joke when you watched me walk 3 miles in a snowstorm because I couldn't afford the bus? Was it a joke when you used my name to take out loans that ruined my credit? We were going to pay it back," she wailed. "We just needed a little more time. Marcus said you'd be fine, that you were tough. Please, Clara, we're sisters." "We aren't sisters, Sarah. We were never family. You were a predator and I was your prey." "But the thing about prey is that sometimes it learns how to bite back." "I'll give you everything," she screamed. "I'll give you the house back, just let me out." "I already have the house, Sarah. I have the cars, I have the money. And in about 10 minutes, I'm going to have the satisfaction of hanging up this phone and never thinking about you again." "Clara, no, don't you dare." I pressed the end button. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. That evening, I stood on the deck as the first stars began to pierce the twilight. The 3 years of darkness were finally behind me. My father was in a cell, my stepmother was a social pariah, and my stepsister was finally learning the value of $1 in the most brutal way possible. I looked at my reflection in the glass door. I wasn't the tired, broken girl from the warehouse anymore. I was a Vance, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what that meant. It meant strength, it meant integrity, and it meant that I was finally truly home. The final gavel fell 6 months later, marking the end of the most publicized trial the state had seen in a decade. My father, Marcus Vance, was sentenced to 18 years in a maximum security facility. His face, once the picture of groomed elegance, looked like a crumbled piece of parchment as the guards led him away. He didn't look at me, he couldn't. Diane followed with an 8-year sentence, and Sarah, entitled cruel stepsister, was given 12 years for her direct role in the identity theft and forgery. As I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse, the swarm of reporters felt like a cloud of gnats. They shouted questions about the Vance fortune and the warehouse heiress, but I ignored them. I didn't need their validation, I had the truth. 1 year has passed since that cold Thanksgiving dinner. Today, the air at Emerald Cliff Manor is crisp and clear, carrying the scent of pine and the coming winter. I am standing in the center of my new office, the very room where I once watched Sarah's husband beg for mercy. The mahogany shelves are now filled with case files, but not for corporate takeovers. These are the files of people who, like me, were silenced by those they trusted most. My firm, Vance Restitution, has already recovered over $15 million for victims of elder abuse and familial fraud. I don't just provide legal help, I provide the resources I never had: credit rehabilitation, psychological support, and a pathway to independence. A soft knock at the door brings me back to the present. My grandmother Evelyn walks in carrying 2 glasses of sparkling cider. She looks younger now, as if the weight of the family's secrets had been keeping her aged. "The gala invitation arrived, Clara," she says, placing a glass on my desk. "The university wants to name the new business wing after you. They're calling it the Clara Vance Center for Ethics." I smile, taking a sip of the cider. "Tell them I'll accept, but only if they offer a full scholarship to 1 student every year who is a survivor of domestic or financial hardship. I want to make sure the door is open for the next girl who thinks she's trapped in a warehouse." "Always thinking of the climb," Evelyn muses, looking out over the lake. "I spoke to the warden at Sarah's facility yesterday. It's part of the quarterly report Elia's Thorn handles." I stiffened slightly. "And she's working in the kitchen, Clara, scrubbing industrial pots for 12 hours a day." Apparently, she tried to start a fight over the quality of the soap, and they put her in solitary for a week. She's finally learning that in the real world, your last name doesn't buy you a softer brush. I thought I would feel a surge of triumph, but instead I feel a strange, quiet peace. The anger that had fueled me for so long has burned down into a steady, productive warmth. I don't hate her anymore, Grandma. Hate is an emotion you waste on people who matter. To me, Sarah, Marcus, and Diane are just ghosts, shadows in a mirror I've already walked past. Evelyn reaches across the desk and takes my hand. You did more than reclaim your life, Clara. You built a fortress out of the stones they threw at you. Your mother would have been so proud of the woman wearing her pearls today. I touch the pearls around my neck, feeling the smooth, cool surface. They no longer feel like a burden or a stolen trophy. They feel like a promise. Later that evening, after Evelyn leaves, I walk down to the edge of the lake. The water is still, reflecting the vast, star-studded sky. I think back to the girl who used to cry in a dark basement, shivering under a thin blanket, wondering why the world was so cruel. I wish I could reach back through time and tell her that the fire wouldn't consume her, it would forge her. My phone vibrates in my pocket. It's a message from my lead investigator. Assets of the Miller Group frozen. Final restitution payment for the lake house rental income has cleared. You are 100% whole, Clara. I tuck the phone away. I am whole, not because of the millions in the bank and not because of the glass and stone mansion behind me. I am whole because I stopped waiting to be rescued and decided to become the hero of my own story. The wind picks up, rustling the autumn leaves, but I don't move. I'm not cold anymore. I have my home, I have my purpose, and I have a future that no one can ever steal again. As I turn back toward the house, the lights of Emerald Cliff Manor glow warmly against the night. It's no longer just a house bought with a check. It's a monument to the truths, and as the front door closes behind me, I know that for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am meant to be. The nightmare is over. My life has finally begun.